Hi everyone. So I just watched the TED video called Becoming the Leader and Object of a Cult in 20 Years or Less. And I realized as I watched that video that that's not actually what the person is talking about. The person in that video is talking about all kinds of things, about potatoes and about what she's gonna do when she's in a nursing home and who she's gonna sleep with, but she didn't really explain how to become the leader and object of a cult in 20 years or less. So I thought, I can do that better, I could actually make a video like that and explaining how to do that. But of course, it doesn't even have to be in 20 years, If you really wanted to, you could probably do that much quicker. But of course, the point of this video isn't, to allow you to actually become a cult leader. Well, if you really wanted to, you probably could, but that's not the point. And rather, the point is in exposing those methods. That's the point. I want to, by explaining how it's done, I want to expose the methods that are used. I don't want you to actually try and become a cult leader. If you seriously want, if that really is your goal, I would really ask you to reconsider, because it's actually not such a great thing. I mean, basically what it boils down to is you want to become like this really powerful person that has a lot of money and a lot of power over a lot of people, that basically worship him, follow you everywhere, and they all say, oh yeah, you're so great. And of course that sounds great. I mean, who doesn't want to be worshipped and who doesn't want to be really powerful and have people serving him 24/7 and have all kinds of cars and all kinds of mansions, and basically it starts to sound like kind of like a dictator, kind of like Kim Jong-un. Who doesn't want to be Kim Jong-un? I mean, of course you're saying, oh yeah, Kim Jong-un is evil, but not if you yourself can be Kim Jong-un. That sounds great, right? who wouldn't want that? I'm telling you, it's not that I can speak from experience, but I'm telling you, it's not as great a thing as people think, because Kim Jong-un doesn't really have such a good life like we think he does. It's actually not great at all, because I think he's probably the most miserable person ever. Why? Because he obtained his power by manipulation and by coercion and by violence and by intimidation. That's kind of how it works in North Korea, and that's exactly his problem. People in the Communist Party in North Korea, they kind of know that that's the way to gain power, right? Basically by killing off your enemies, and he's pretty good at this. Why does Kim Jong-un kill so many people, even in his own family? Because he's paranoid. He's killing everybody that he sees as a potential threat, out of fear that if he doesn't, they gonna kill him. So he's the most miserable person you can imagine, because he's constantly afraid that someone is gonna outsmart him, that someone is gonna take his position and will have him killed. That's why he's so paranoid. That's why he's killing everybody else, because of that extreme paranoid fear. So you don't want to be like that. You don't want to have that constant fear, not only for your position, but for your life, because at that point, if someone takes your position, because of course everyone wants to become the dear leader, if they become, there can only be one dear leader or great leader or whatever, so what happens to the other leader? Each time there was a new leader, the old one died. So you can understand that he's constantly afraid for his life. So you don't really want that. Now, I used North Korea as an example right now, but we were talking about becoming a cult leader. So why did I use North Korea as an example? Because that's actually kind of what people mean, When people talk about a cult, they don't mean the literary definition of what the word means. They probably don't even know what the word means. But what they really mean is basically something like North Korea. And when they talk about a cult leader, they don't really mean a religious figure or a saint or someone like Jesus. They probably mean someone like Kim Jong-un. And actually the word cult, the original meaning, is something completely different. The word cult comes from cultus, and it means basically a ritual, and it has nothing to do with the kind of dictator like Kim Jong-un that we're talking about. And it doesn't have to be it doesn't even have to be a group. If you're just sitting there in your room and you're praying to God, or you're praying to Mother Nature, then by the original meaning of the word cult, then you're already basically a cult member, even though there isn't even a group. You could just be by yourself, So that's not what people mean. So I think the word cult is actually really misleading. But there is no better word for it, or we don't really have another word for it, so I have to use that word. But so nowadays, when people use the word cult, they don't mean someone, or they don't necessarily mean just someone who is by himself and who's praying, or who has a belief in God. That's not really what they mean. What they mean is someone who is part of a group. Could be, for example, actually communism is a good example, because of course communism is atheist, but that's just my point. It doesn't have anything to do with a belief in God. It doesn't have to, a lot of times when I talk with atheists, they tend to call anybody who doesn't agree with them, doesn't agree with their worldview and with their group, because there are actually also a lot of atheist groups. So anyone who thinks differently, they will say you're in a cult, even though even though that person might not even be the member of any group. He just might not be an atheist, But in order to discriminate against him, they will say, "Oh yeah, you all religious people and everybody who believes in God, they're all crazy and they're all cult members," And that's actually exactly the kind of discrimination that the kind of cult that we actually mean will use. They will discriminate outsiders. And that's actually how the word cult has gotten that negative meaning that it has nowadays. Is because it was used by religious groups, in particular, of course, the Catholic Church, to discriminate against people who did not, to discriminate against people who did not think the way that they do, you know. So it doesn't actually have anything to do with being an atheist or not being an atheist. It has to do with a group, you know. There's a group of people, they have a common ideology, you know. That ideology can be a religious belief, but it doesn't have to be. It could also be an atheist belief. So it works just as well with an atheist belief, or probably even better. So communism is a really good example, I think, because and of course I have to use communism as an example or as a reference because that's kind of, you know, what I experienced. Because when I grew up, my mother, my mother is a communist, or was a. I don't really know if she still is, but at that time she was a really devout communist, and not just an ordinary party member, but kind of almost like a communist official. And I grew up in a lot of communist communes. So those communist communes, they were a great example, because you have a group of people and they have a common belief or a common non-belief, you know. Could also, you know, it could also be, anyway, there is something that unites them, that makes them a group, you know, because there has to be something that differentiates them from the people outside, you know. And of course, that could be that they're all communists, or that could it could also be something much simpler. It could also be that they're all atheists, you know, that they're all thinking, yeah, well, we know the truth. We know that religions are all evil. They're all evil cults, and only we here, our group, we know the truth. We know that religions are evil cults, and we are so much smarter than the people outside. We are enlightened to atheism, to whatever, you know. Of course, that already sounds a lot like like the kind of cult we probably think of. But it can be something much simpler. It could also be just the location, you know, because my mother put me into a lot of communes, and you know, I went to a lot of different places, and even if it wasn't a commune, even if it just was an ordinary village, no matter to what village I went, each village thought that they're like the best village in the world, you know, because they weren't like me. They didn't really leave their place, you know. They were born in that village, grew up in that village, and never went somewhere else. So they have no reference. So because they only know the village they live in, they of course think that they are the best village in the world. It could be the biggest shithole, but they still think that they're the best village in the world. You know, and that's also something that can be used, you know. It could be something as simple as that, you know, that they're saying, yeah, our village is the best. Look at the mountain we live in, such a great mountain, or the valley, such a great valley, whatever. Wherever they live, that's the best place, and that's something that distinguishes them from anybody else, because of course anybody else does not live in their place, which is the best place. And of course, maybe not necessarily everyone in that group actually thinks that their place is the best place, or that their ideology is the best ideology. And since you want to become the cult leader, you probably don't buy into that shit either. You might not actually be a real communist. You might not actually believe in that stuff. Or you might not believe in the ideology, whatever ideology it is. Or, you know, if it's something as simple as our village being the best village, you might not even believe in that. You probably came from another village and you went to that village thinking, oh yeah, the people in that village, they're gullible. And they have the biggest shithole, so I'm just gonna tell them that they have the best place on earth. So that way they're gonna follow you, because people like to think that. People like to believe that, And actually, that's the first step that you have to take. And a lot of people will even take that first step without realizing what they're doing. I mean, a lot of people will do it consciously and will think, okay, I want to manipulate those people, and I want to be the most powerful guy within this group of people. But initially that might not even be the motivation. It might not even be as premeditated as that. So a lot of people, especially when they come from the outside, and actually for that, Hitler is a good example. You do realize that Hitler was the only head of state of Germany that wasn't German. He was the only one. And at the same time, he was also the one who discriminated against outsiders and against people who aren't German the most. Why did he do that? Because if you come to a group of people that can be a small village or it can be an entire country, it doesn't matter. If you come to a group of people and you come from the outside, the first thing you want to do is you want to fit in. You want to be accepted. You don't want to be discriminated against. So the best way, in their minds, to avoid that, to avoid being shunned and being excluded from that community, is to discriminate yourself. Discriminate against people who don't belong to that community. So that's what Hitler did. That's why he was hating on Jews so much. It's not that was his idea. That was back then people already had a lot of prejudice against Jews. So he just used that in order to be accepted initially. And then he realized if he went even further with that, they don't just accept him, but they make them their leader. And why do they do that? Because like I said, you're of course you're not the only one. There was also a lot of other people, a lot of other opportunists who want to rise to power, and you can't do that. You will get nowhere if you don't tell people what they want to hear, and they want to hear that their group of people is the best group of people. So if you come along and tell them that, a lot of other opportunists will realize that that by telling the people that you can rise in power. So if you're like the guy who does that the most, then you have good chances of becoming the leader, because a lot of people will then agree with you, because they also seek power and they also realize that by telling people those things, it makes them rise in power, and it enables them to gather a lot of followers, because people want to hear that. So you automatically kind of rise in power, and there are people who kind of compete with you, but it will also help you to rise in power. And then it just depends basically on how ruthless you are. Because eventually you have to eliminate your competition. Literally eliminate. So what you have to do is to really foster that kind of us against them mentality. When I was in those communist communes as a child, that mentality that mentality was extremely strong. It was really everyone outside that community was like evil, and they had words for them, Of course, they wouldn't just call them evil or call them some kind of insult directly. They made up words for them, and that can be words like cult is actually a good example. It's usually a word that originally doesn't have a negative meaning, and is basically applied to anybody who thinks differently. If you go into any cult, they will all say that they're not the cult. The other groups, they're the cult. Everybody thinks that his group of people, they're the real chosen people. Now that might be in a religious sense, or it doesn't have to have religious connotations. North Koreans also believe that they're the chosen people. Germans used to believe that that Germans are the Übermenschen, yeah, that they're also basically the chosen people, the best, the purest race on earth, So and anybody who isn't part of that community is a cult member. Cult members are always the people who think differently than you do. Nobody would say, "Oh yeah, I'm in a cult," even though they, I'm in a cult. I do pray from time to time. So, but I'm not a member of any group of people. But I do believe in God, for example. So So for a lot of atheists, and especially atheist communities, that's already reason enough to say that that's reason enough to discriminate me and say, yeah, he's a cult member, whatever, and that's exactly what they will do. They will make up words that originally don't have a negative connotation and could be applied to anybody. They will give that word a negative connotation and will apply it to outsiders, to anybody who thinks differently than they do, and to anybody who is not part of their community. Because, like I said, that's actually exactly how the word cult got its negative connotation, because it was used by the Catholic Church against against people who didn't share their belief, who didn't who believed something different than what the Catholic Church wants them to believe. Now, you can actually become that kind of leader of a community, even without intending to, because there is a lot of group dynamics at work that, if you play it right, will kind of automatically put you in that position, given that you eliminate your competition. What's important is that you want to be the leader, right? So you really have to be the leader in discriminating against others. You have to really tell people that, they're really the best. And anybody who doesn't agree with you, agree with your saying that they're the best, he's the enemy. And that works wonders. Because people want to feel superior. If you tell them that they're superior, they're going to love you. They're going to make you their leader. Almost automatically, because, they want to feel superior. They like what you tell them. And of course, there's going to be people like me who make stupid YouTube videos exposing those kinds of methods, for example. So those people, of course, they belong to the enemy. So, for example, they wouldn't at all talk about what I talk about in this video. Yeah, if for example, if my video were to spread in such a community, their response wouldn't be to actually talk about the arguments or the methods that I'm explaining in my video. That wouldn't be their approach at all. It's much simpler. They just say, yeah, well, but don't you see? This is exactly the enemy. The guy who made this video, I mean, he's ridiculous anyway. Look at this fat capitalist pig, you know? He's a capitalist. Of course he's gonna attack our dear leader. Of course. He's the enemy. Don't you realize that he's the enemy? You know? We don't even have to bring any argument. We just say he's the enemy, and he's evil, and he's a capitalist, or he belongs to a cult, or he's Jewish, or whatever. He's the enemy. Whatever the enemy is, or whatever your word for people who think differently is. That's what anybody becomes who criticizes the community. And the community will be very quick in, of course, expelling that person from the community. Because, and of course, they will be also very quick in attacking that person, in discriminating against that person. It can even very easily lead as far as using violence, using actual physical violence against that person. Now, that doesn't even have to be stipulated. You don't even have to tell your followers, yeah, if someone voices different opinion, kill him. You don't have to say that. They will do that themselves, because the more fear you instill in them, the more they will discriminate and abuse anybody who they think is not part of the group, because they don't want to be victimized themselves. You know, so you have to at a certain point you have to start using fear. You know, you have to basically what you have to do at a certain point is basically that's already almost enough. All you have to do is just build your own private army, you know, mercenaries, you know. You have to have that at a certain point. You don't even necessarily have to use it for anything. You just need people to know that you have your group of mercenaries, that you have your own little private army. You know, they just have to know that it's there. You know? And that alone will scare people into complying, and will make them afraid that if they don't go along, if they don't actively discriminate against perceived outsiders or perceived enemies, then that little cute little private army you have might be used against them, you know, because of course anybody who helps outsiders or who helps the enemy can be labeled an enemy of the people himself. So you don't necessarily have to tell people, oh yeah, discriminate against outsiders or use violence against them or kill them. You don't have to tell them that. They just have to know that as soon as they get labeled the enemy, then they might have something to fear. So that fear alone will compel them to discriminate against others proactively, and maybe to even use violence against perceived outsiders proactively. But in case family members, now someone who might be that the probably all have family, right? because he thinks differently and he disagrees with the leader, he will of course be labeled an outsider or be labeled an enemy, and he will be shunned by the community at the very least, because they have to do that. They have to maintain their integrity, maintain the integrity of the community. So anyone who questions the community or questions their ideology or whatever, he, at the very least, he has to be shunned and made and has to be expelled from the community, because the community would not be able to, because that's what holds them together, that sense of feeling superior to the outsiders, so if someone questions that, he has to be expelled, because he's a danger to the unity of the community. If someone were to say, yeah, look, outsiders are not so bad, and I have been to other places, they're not as bad as we think, and the people we call enemies, they're just people, If someone says something like that, he has to, at the very least, be expelled from the community, or worse. In some cases, he's just, killed, But at the very least, he has to be expelled from the community. So that's a kind of a problem, because everyone has family, and since he originally was part of the community, it's very likely that his family is also part of the community. So, but now he has to be expelled. Now he's labeled the enemy, and of course, since he's the enemy, it's best if you help in actively discriminating against him. If you actively discriminate against the enemies, that can help you rise up in rank, and that can help you. That can help you avoid being labeled the enemy yourself. But what if it's your family member? What if it's your son? What if it's your mother, your daughter, whatever? What do you do then? I mean, you definitely don't want to kill them, But of course, you don't have to kill them, and you don't necessarily have to use violence against them. I mean, that's a bonus. If you use violence against the enemies, that will help you, probably help you rise up the ranks. But you're thinking, okay, well, in that case, I don't want to rise up the ranks, But you definitely don't want to be expelled from the community yourself. So what do you do? At the very least, you have to make a decision, between the community and your family member. You have to decide for one or the other. Because. If you stick with your family member, you're gonna be expelled as well. And that expelled from the community, and that can also mean that others might use violence against you, or that at the very least that can mean that will mean that others, the rest of your family, will distance themselves from you. So, yeah, he's your son. Yeah, she's your daughter, mother, whatever. But you also have other relatives, What about them? You don't want to cast out your son, but you don't want to. You do want to still have contact with your son, but you also want to have contact with your mother, your brother, your father. If you stick with your son, then you're gonna be expelled as well, and you will not have contact with any of your family members at the very least, or you might even get them all into physical danger. If you're the head of your family, then you really want to educate your family. You don't want to lose anyone from your family. I mean, of course, your family is very dear to you. So you're going to do a very good job in making it clear to your children that they must never question the authority of the leader and of the community. You know that it's all hogwash. You know that it's just about manipulating people and and it's just about that one guy who's at the top. It's just about him exploiting the people, and it's just about him getting rich and him having so much power and him having so many mansions. You know all that, but you still educate your children to absolutely obey the leader and to never ever be at odds with the community, because you know that if they ever criticize any of that you know in your heart is wrong, you criticize it yourself, but you don't say it. So you tell them to never criticize them, even though you know it's wrong, because you don't want to lose them. Because you know as soon as they criticize the community, they're going to be, at the very least, they're going to be expelled from the community, and you will be forced to break any connections with them, otherwise you will be expelled from the community as well. So you don't want to lose any of them, so you really want to want to educate your children in a way so that they will know to obey the rules of your community. Now, I have to make clear that all of this actually has a lot to do with group dynamics, mob psychology, and the exploitation of human weaknesses. It doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the ideology of the community itself. I used communism as an example because it is a good example, because all those bad things, they're kind of already built into communism, like the discrimination of outsiders. For example, with communists, it's basically they have a lot of words for enemies. Basically, as soon as you criticize them, you become an anti-communist, which, objectively speaking, isn't anything bad. But in the eyes of communists, being an anti-communist is like the worst thing ever, So the discrimination of people who think differently is already kind of built into communism. That's why communism is a great example, and then that's why I used Kim Jong-un, for example. But it doesn't have to be. It works with other ideologies as well. It can work with any ideology, even really good ideologies. Even if there is an ideology that really teaches people to be good, and that really that even tells people to not behave this way, to not discriminate against others. Even if there's an ideology like that, it still works. Even if the ideology specifically is specifically against the discrimination of others, the discrimination of outsiders, etc. Even then, it still works. Why? Because as soon as you have a group of people, those group dynamics and the weaknesses of human nature, they start to play a role, even if the ideology everyone shares is that we shouldn't discriminate against outsiders, even if that's the ideology, then as soon as the ideology spreads, people say, oh yeah, that's a good ideology, we really shouldn't discriminate against outsiders. That's great. And but then as soon as a community of people who believe in that ideology starts to form, all those bad aspects, the mob psychology, group dynamics, all of that starts playing a role. Because as soon as there is a group, then other people say, oh, there is this group of people. That's a neat community. And what do they have what is their principle? Oh, their principle is to not discriminate against others. That's a worthy cause, And I see that because it's such a worthy cause, a lot of my friends, they start joining this group and, identifying with this worthy cause. That's great, So, actually, you know what? I don't even really care about that. I mean, I don't really care about that ideology. I mean, it is a worthy cause not to discriminate against others. But I see that so many of my friends start joining this group. So I kind of feel left out if I don't join as well, Things like that will start to play a role. And what happens then is that a lot of you get even though the ideology that unites everyone is a good ideology, even if the motto, so to say, is to not discriminate against outsiders, even if that is what unites everybody, as soon as a group is formed, others will want to join into that group. Not necessarily because they agree with the ideology. At a certain point, they might not even know about the original intentions anymore. They might not even care about the ideology at all. They just see that all of their friends join this group, so they just feel left out if they don't join as well. So as soon as any group is formed, you will necessarily have people in there that don't come because of the good cause. If it is a good cause, it might very well be a good cause, But you will start having people that don't come because of that, but that just become of group dynamics because they see all of their friends join, so they also want to join, those tricks that let's call him leader or dictator, all the tricks that the dictator will use, they work on these kinds of people, the kinds of people that come because of group dynamics. So no matter what the cause, no matter what the ideology, those group dynamics will still play an effect, and it can still be exploited by people with bad intentions, even if the cause itself is good. So maybe that's exactly why you have people who will then disagree with the leader. Maybe those people who get labeled the enemy and who get out, who get cast out, maybe they're not even against the ideology. Like I said, maybe the ideology itself really isn't bad. Maybe the ideology itself might actually really be don't discriminate against others. So but you have two groups of people within the group. You have those people who really believe in the ideology, and you have the people who came because of group dynamics. So so the people who get labeled the enemy, they're not necessarily against the ideology. Maybe it's even the case that the reason why they start opposing the people who come because of group dynamics might be precisely because they feel that the people who come because of group dynamics are not really, not genuinely following the original principles. So the people who get who become outcasts, they might actually, be the ones who actually really believe in the ideology, if it is a good ideology. But they still get outcast because of group dynamics. And the other people might even think, maybe the people who get labeled the enemy, maybe they're really not that bad. Maybe they maybe there really isn't anything wrong with them, but they can't say that because otherwise they get outcast as well. So if you're in that position, if suddenly, maybe precisely because you believe in that ideology, and maybe precisely because of that, you suddenly get outcast, and everybody starts claiming that you're the enemy, you're evil, that's really difficult, because if you were in that group, the people who now criticize you, they're your friends, they're your family. You really care about the people. And you might even really care about the ideology. And like I said, it might really be a good ideology. So that's really difficult for those people who then, who get outcast and who get labeled the enemy. That's really difficult. It takes a toll on them. You have to really be immune to emotions, basically, in order to get through that. But people are not robots. People have emotions. So people are not immune to that treatment. It takes a toll on them. And, what happens in a lot of cases is that it's really difficult for those people because, all their friends now turn against them. If they don't have really strong principles, they're not gonna be able to pull through that. So a lot of people then they start saying, who cares about principles? Who cares if the original principle was to not discriminate against others, and now I get discriminated against because I uphold that principles. Who cares about principles? I just want to talk to my friends again. I want to talk to my family again. I don't want to be treated as the enemy. I don't want to be outcast. So a lot of people give in, because they're not strong enough. But before they can rejoin the glorious community, they can't just, they were labeled the enemy. So, since they're now the enemy, they can't just, just rejoin the group just like that, because if they join the group just like that, they might, continue to criticize the group or the group dynamics within the group. So, of course, that can't be allowed. So before they can rejoin, they basically have to be brainwashed. They are not allowed to rejoin the group unless they basically confess, and then you have those communists are infamous for those public confessions and public denunciations, and that's where they come in. They have to publicly confess that that they were wrong, and basically they have to denounce themselves now. And they have to make a confession, a public confession, and it goes something, along these lines, something like that, Yeah, I realize that my ways were wrong. It wasn't really my fault. I was manipulated by our evil enemies, the Jews, the capitalists, the Trotskyists, whatever. You know, they manipulated me, the evil enemies of our group. I realize now that our enemies are truly evil, and I was wrong. I was wrong for following our evil enemies, and I realized that only our group is the right one. And I only ask that I be able to rejoin our glorious group, because I really truly know that it is the only true one, and it is the chosen group. I love Big Brother. I hate Emmanuel Goldstein. Something like that. And that is particularly apparent in China. In some of my previous videos, I actually showed you some of those confessions. I'm gonna link some of those videos again, so you can watch actual confessions like that. You know, they're very prominent on Chinese state-run television. And as you know, there is no religious freedom in China. So a lot of religious groups in China get persecuted by the Communist Party. In order to justify their persecution of religious groups, the Communist Party claims that all the religions it persecutes are actually evil cults. And the way it works is basically that they beat you until you make a confession like that. And then the confession starts to sound really ridiculous, because they're basically brainwashing you into obedience, while all the way claiming that they would actually free you from whatever religious group they're calling a cult at the moment. And then it results in some of those ridiculous public confessions that I showed you in my other videos, and I'm gonna link those videos in the end screen if you want to watch them.